is one of the most iconic photos in the history of the sport.
It took only 5 seconds to destroy a myth that took a lifetime to build. 5 seconds. That's all the time Jorge Masvidal needed to turn Ben Askren from an undefeated champion into a meme that would define him forever.
I started off making videos on Vine. So my career started in 6 seconds, and your career ended in 6
But to understand what broke Ben Askren, you have to understand why he thought he couldn't be broken.
A guy like Ben Askren, I mean, it just shows you.
Ben hasn't competed, I think, in 9 years.
True.
But Ben is one of the greatest.
You have to go back to a time when he made the entire sport look easy, when he controlled fights like a chess master moving pieces on a board, when nobody on earth could figure out how to stop him.
Use Dean Thomas by example. Said he wrestled with Ben Askren, and grappling with Ben Askren was like grappling with 2 men at one time.
Ben Askren wasn't just good, he made everyone else look lost. In college, he didn't just win, he dominated with a style so unorthodox they called it funky. 153 wins, 7 losses, 2 NCAA Division I championships, 2 Dan Hodge trophies, wrestling's version of the Heisman. He pinned opponents so frequently, he holds the 3rd most pins in Division I history. 91 times he planted someone's shoulders to the mat and made them quit. His body moved in ways that didn't make sense. His scrambles defied physics. Coaches watched tape of him and couldn't explain what they were seeing. He turned wrestling into an art form that belonged only to him. But being the best in college wasn't enough. Ben wanted more. He wanted Olympic gold. That was the dream. That was everything. In 2008, he made the U.S. Olympic team and headed to Beijing with one goal: to stand on top of that podium and prove he was the greatest wrestler in the world. He won his first match. Then he lost. And because of how the bracket worked, his entire Olympic dream came down to someone else's performance. He had no control anymore. For the first time in his life, his fate wasn't in his hands. He stood backstage, alone, watching a match between 2 men he wasn't even fighting, knowing that if the wrong guy won, he was done. The wrong guy won. Ben Askren's Olympic dream died in 2 hours. Most athletes would have crumbled. Ben didn't. He found a new frontier: mixed martial arts. If he couldn't be an Olympic champion, he'd become a cage fighting champion instead. And the transition was seamless. His wrestling was so suffocating, so relentless, that strikers had no idea what to do against him. He'd take them down, control them, grind them into exhaustion, and break their will. He made fighting look boring to some people, but to those who understood grappling, he was a genius. He joined Bellator and tore through their welterweight division like it was nothing. He became champion, defended the title 4 times, went completely undefeated, 12-0 against top-level competition. At one point, he was ranked number 7 in the world. But here's the thing, the UFC didn't want him.
Ben Askren just isn't one of those kind of guys. He's not a guy. Then I'm hearing just stupidness that I wanted him to go to World Series of Fighting. I don't give a fuck where he goes. He can go fight in fucking ABC and on fucking Pluto for all I care.
I mean, for me, the biggest benefit is not having to work for Dana White. That guy's a freaking scumbag. Like, even if he paid me triple what I'm earning here, which would be a boatload of money, I don't know that I can see myself working for him. He's just a terrible person all around.
Dana White called him one-dimensional. Bellator released a statement that basically said he was boring. Joe Rogan begged for him to come to the UFC, saying, "This guy could do this to everybody," but Dana didn't care. He said Ben could go fight on Pluto for all he cared. And Ben fired back. He called Dana a scumbag, said his ego was too big, said he didn't need the UFC because he wasn't going to bow down and kiss anyone's shoes. But underneath all that confidence, all that trash talk, there had to be doubt. When the best league in the world doesn't want you, when they go out of their way to say you're not good enough, how do you not start questioning yourself? How do you keep believing you're the best when the biggest stage won't let you prove it? And so Ben went to ONE Championship, the biggest organization in Asia, a place that wanted to see the best fight the best, no matter how they fought. And just like in Bellator, he dominated. He became the ONE welterweight champion, defended the title 3 times, went undefeated again, 7-0. Add that to his Bellator record and you've got 18 wins, 0 losses, 2 world titles, and a legacy that should have cemented him as one of the greatest fighters who ever lived. But there was still that void, that question. Could he do it in the UFC? He said he didn't need to. He said he was perfectly content retiring, going back to his family, coaching wrestling, living his life. But that void was still there. Then in 2018, something unprecedented happened. The UFC made a trade. They traded Demetrius Johnson, one of the greatest fighters of all time, to ONE Championship in exchange for Ben Askren. A trade. In MMA. It had never happened before. And just like that, Ben was in. He was finally getting his shot. Dana White smiled that reluctant smile and said, "All right, Ben, show us." The UFC matched him up with Robbie Lawler, a former champion, a violent brawler who took years off fighters' careers. It was a test, maybe even a trap. But Ben opened as the heavy favorite. People expected him to ragdoll Robbie, to show the world that his wrestling was levels above everyone else. March 2nd, 2019, UFC 235, Ben Askren's debut. It didn't go the way anyone expected. Within seconds, Robbie picked Ben up and spiked him on his head. Then he started raining down punches, brutal, violent punches that had Joe Rogan screaming that Ben was in trouble. We had never seen Ben Askren in a position like this. Never. He'd been so dominant for so long, and now he looked vulnerable, but he survived. He worked his way to the cage, scrambled, got Robbie down, and locked in a bulldog choke. Robbie's arm went limp. The ref stopped the fight. Ben won. But immediately, Robbie protested. He said he wasn't out. He gave a thumbs up. The replay showed his arm going limp and then coming back to life. It was controversial. Dana wanted a rematch. Robbie wanted a rematch. But Ben said no. He wasn't going backwards. He had a plan. He had 18 months to get a title shot before his body gave out completely. His hips were deteriorating. Bone spurs. Agony in training. He couldn't waste time on rematches. So he started talking. He went to London for the Darren Till versus Jorge Masvidal fight and made himself the biggest villain in the building. He insulted the crowd. He wore a shirt that said curly-headed fuck, mocking them. He wanted the winner of that fight, and he wanted the hype to be so massive that the UFC couldn't say no. He expected Darren Till to win. Till was the rising star, the hometown hero, the future of the division. Jorge Masvidal was just a journeyman, a guy who'd been around forever, never quite broke through, always fell short in the big moments. But Jorge had just come back from a reality show where he spent weeks alone in the jungle with nothing but his thoughts, and something changed in him. He decided he was done being the victim of close decisions. He was going to finish people, violently. Till versus Masvidal, July 6, 2019, UFC 239. Jorge knocked Darren Till unconscious with a flying knee and punches. 3-piece and a soda. Baptized him. Shocked the world. And just like that, the fight everyone wanted was Ben Askren versus Jorge Masvidal. The trash talk was relentless. Ben called Jorge a journeyman, a coward, a fake. Jorge said Ben was selling something that wasn't there, that he was going to expose him, humiliate him. Ben kept his hands behind his back during face-offs, a non-threatening gesture, almost mocking. He said Jorge couldn't do anything to him, that it was impossible, that he would dominate him. But Jorge had been drilling something. Throughout the entire fight camp, he'd been working on a flying knee. July 6, 2019, UFC 239. The cage door closed. The ref said fight. Ben Askren shot forward. Jorge Masvidal jumped. Knee. 5 seconds. The fastest knockout in UFC history. Ben was out cold before he hit the ground. His body went stiff. His eyes rolled back. The ref didn't even need to stop it. It was over. Jorge stood over him, arms raised, and the entire arena erupted. 5 seconds. That's how long it took to turn a career into a meme, to turn a decade of dominance into a punchline, to turn an undefeated legend into the guy who got knocked out by a flying knee. The aftermath was instant. Twitter exploded. Memes everywhere. Billions of views. Years later, it's still one of the most iconic moments in UFC history, and Ben Askren was on the wrong side of it. He woke up in the hospital confused, asking his wife how bad it was. She just said, "Yeah, it was bad. It was fast." For a man who built his entire identity on control, on breaking opponents mentally and physically, losing control in 5 seconds was devastating. But Ben didn't make excuses. He didn't ask for sympathy. He said things happened. That's fighting. But you could see it, the weight of it, the humiliation of being defined by a single moment. 3 months later, he fought again. Too soon, way too soon. UFC Singapore. Main event against Demian Maia, one of the best grapplers in the world. It was a back-and-forth fight, sloppy striking, grappling exchanges, and then Maia locked in a rear-naked choke. Ben went to sleep again. 2 losses in a row, both by finish. The guy who had been undefeated for a decade, who had never even lost a round in some people's eyes, was now 0-2 in his last 2 fights, and his body was done. His hips couldn't take it anymore. He needed surgery. He needed to stop. November 2019, Ben Askren announced his retirement. He said, "I'm retiring from mixed martial arts. I'm retiring from everything. I need a hip replacement. That's it for me." And just like that, the UFC career of Ben Askren was over. 3 fights, 1 controversial win, 2 brutal losses. The biggest what if in the sport became the biggest disappointment. People said he was exposed, that he was never that good, that he only beat nobodies outside the UFC. But those people didn't understand. Ben's body was already broken when he got to the UFC. He was 35 years old. He'd wrestled at the highest level since he was a kid. His hips were held together by sheer willpower. He wasn't the same fighter who dominated Bellator and won. He was a shell, and Dana White knew it. He waited until Ben wasn't Ben anymore, and then he let him in. But the story doesn't end there. A year and a half later, Ben came back, not for MMA, for boxing. Jake Paul, the YouTuber turned boxer, wanted to fight a real fighter to legitimize his career, and Ben took the deal. People convinced themselves he had a chance, that his toughness, his mentality, his wrestling IQ would translate. But Ben Askren was never a striker, not in MMA, and definitely not in boxing. And Jake Paul was young, athletic, and had been training boxing full-time for years. It was a mismatch. April 17th, 2021. Jake Paul versus Ben Askren. Jake knocked him out in the first round. The commentators mocked him. Snoop Dogg said he looked like a bag of milk. It was humiliating. Again. And people said it ruined his legacy, that he should have stayed retired, that he embarrassed himself for money. But here's the thing. Ben didn't see it that way. He said, "Yeah, I lost. It sucked. But I wasn't scared to take the chance. I wasn't afraid to step into the unknown and see what happened. I didn't have my ego tied to the outcome." And honestly, I think a lot of people are just projecting their own feelings of embarrassment onto me. I can proudly say I've never known any other way. After everything, after the knockouts, after the memes, after the Jake Paul fight, Ben went home, back to his family, back to his wrestling academy, back to coaching kids who look up to him not because he was undefeated, but because he showed them what it means to be fearless, to chase greatness even when the world tells you you're not good enough, to fail publicly and still stand tall. Every fighter falls. The lucky ones learn to laugh about it. The great ones learn to live with it. Ben Askren didn't lose that night in 2019. The sport did, because we'll never see anyone like him again. A man who refused to play the game, who built his career on his own terms, who walked away when his body gave out, and who came back one last time just to prove he still had the guts. 5 seconds destroyed the myth, but the myth was never the point. The point was that Ben Askren showed up, every single time, and when it was over, he didn't need the world to understand. He just needed to be himself.